Hi, my name is Cameron Schmidt. I'm a clinical anatomy research fellow here at the Seattle Science Foundation, and I'm joined today by Dr. John Street from Vancouver Spine Surgery Institute. Dr. Street's clinical practice focuses on the management of spinal trauma and complex adult spinal deformities. And Dr. Street's here as an honorary visiting professor, and this morning gave a talk at Neurosurgical Grand Rounds about the importance of a complications database in spine surgery, and has kindly taken some time to talk with me for a little bit here about his background and how he got to where he is today.
My pleasure.
Dr. Street, thank you very much for being here. So I just wanted to start with the same question I always ask. Could you give a little background of how you got to where you are? I know you went down the track of general surgery for a little bit and then re-specialized, and if you could just give
Sure.
a little history there.
So I guess my path's been quite long and never direct to spine, and even before I went, I went to high school in Ireland, and in Ireland you go into medical school directly from high school. There's no undergraduate degree first, and initially I had no idea I wanted even to do medicine, and I was lucky enough I did well enough in the grade 11 and grade 12. I was mentored by who was my English teacher at the time, who had kind of talked me through the whole university application process. I applied to do medicine. I went to medicine in Cork in Ireland, in University College Cork. And in Ireland the med school is 6 years. And at the end of that time, everybody does an internship for 1 year, where you do a mix of surgery and medicine, and it gives you an opportunity to get a taste for the different specialities so that you might be able to decide what it is you want to do after that. And I was absolutely convinced halfway through that I wanted to do general surgery. So I had worked with a general surgeon at the Mercy Hospital in Cork, who was a fantastic, hard-working, inspirational guy, and I thought, I want to emulate him. That's what I want to be like. And so I went and I did the general surgical training, which at that time was a 4-year program. And I realized that he was an aberration. And he was really inspirational, and I loved working with him, but I didn't get the same sense, and I wasn't finding the same satisfaction out of general surgery as I thought I would. And that was a difficult time for me because I'd already committed all this time to general surgery, and I had to kind of decide, well, do I stick with this and make the best of it, or do I try and see if there's another path? And I had always been impressed as a medical student and as a resident with orthopedic surgeons and orthopedic senior residents who would come down to the emergency department and fix fractures, and they seemed like they could help patients quickly, get them back on their feet quickly and get them out. And I was really impressed with that ability to see benefit from your intervention really early. So I applied to get a orthopedic residency, but having never worked in orthopedics, I knew no one in the orthopedic field. I went to interview for them, and they said, "Oh, well, you seem like a nice guy, but you've never done orthopedics." And I recall a senior surgeon, Bill Quinlan, who said to me, unless you come back with something really different that sets you apart from the others, you're never going to get on the orthopedic program. You're already 4 years older than all the other people applying. So I had a close friend who had finished the general surgery training program with me, and he was really interested in research, and he helped me come up with a proposal which we put to our university. So I took 2 years out to do a Ph.D. and I did a Ph.D. in bone biology in Cork, and I finished it off with, I had an opportunity actually to come and work at University of California, San Francisco for the last 6 months as a visiting scientist. Finished that, and that was enough to convince the orthopedic guys to give me a place on the program. So then the orthopedic program is 6 years, so I did that. and that took me to 2005. And then in 2005, I came to Vancouver to do a fellowship in spine. So it would have been about 2003. So my second last year in orthopedics, when I started to realize that I had an interest in spine. And it was surprised me at first, because initially when I did spine, I actually found it really difficult. Thought the anatomy was really challenging, and the patient population was very complicated, and the problems that patients have, and trying to tease out what you can and can't help, I found that really difficult. And then I realized actually I liked the challenge of it, and I liked the difficulty of it, and that's how I gravitated towards spine. At that time in 2004, when I applied, Marcel Dvorak and Charles Fisher, who are my senior colleagues now, they had a worldwide reputation, and Vancouver as a program had a great reputation. So I applied there and was lucky enough to get a position there. I think I was helped a bit by the fact that the chief of orthopedics was an Irish guy who had gone to med school and had done his orthopedic residency with the same Bill Quinlan who had interviewed me the very first time for orthopedics. Because I know that they communicated beforehand, and so I think that probably helped a little.
In your favor.
So I did a fellowship in Vancouver from 05 to 06. In fact, the fellow the year before me was Alexis Valikov, who currently works here at Swedish. He was a fellow in Vancouver Spine the year before I came. So I had an opportunity to meet with Alexis there, and he helped orientate us to the new fellowship. And while I was there in that year, the senior surgeon in the group, Peter Wing, was retiring, and so they were looking for a replacement, and I was, I think, in the right place at the right time, I guess. And that's what. So I went on staff in 2006, and I've just done spine. I've been a spine surgeon for 11 years now.
Yes. Well, you've spoken a little bit about this, and it brings me to my second question, is that physicians often talk about a disparity between the vision they had of medicine as they enter versus the reality which they face once they get out on the other end of all of that schooling and training. And you spoke that a little bit. Coming into general surgery, it was not quite what you thought it would be. Did your expectations and the reality accord a little bit better in spine surgery and orthopedics, and then going and doing your fellowship in spine?
I think they did, because I certainly feel that spine is equally as challenging to me now as it was when I was learning it as a resident. And the thing that attracted me to it, so the challenge of it, still remains. I mean, I think that of any of the orthopedic specialities I could have done, spine patients, bring real unique challenges as far as diagnosis and management. And we have so many spine surgeries that we can do, but trying to work out which patients you can help best,
Sure.
to me, is a real challenge. I think if you have hip arthritis or knee arthritis, we know that a hip replacement or a knee replacement is a very, very efficacious treatment. But if you have a spine fusion as an operation, it's not clear not as clear who you can help with that and who you can't. So I think the challenge component has been the same. That's been consistent.
Is that what you felt? Sorry.
Sorry,
I was going to say, is that what you felt like you were lacking a little bit? Was that challenge in general surgery, or was it the type of work itself that just didn't interest you?
I think that the challenge component, because when I had finished and I was about to consider going into practice into general surgery, I didn't feel like I didn't have that sense of real excitement about it, that I was going to be embarking on something that was going to be exciting or challenging. And I started to come to that realization, I guess, in the last year of the residency, that this wasn't as good a fit as I had expected it to be. And when I think back, I think that mentor, that Dr. Sullivan, the GI surgeon that I worked with, he was an aberration in his degree of enthusiasm, and he specialized in upper GI esophagectomy cancer surgery, which is particularly challenging. And so I think what I saw in him, because it wasn't duplicated in the rest of my experience in general surgery, I think I kind of felt, oh, maybe it's not what I thought it was going to be.
That can't have been a quick decision, though, to be that far into training and decide you're going to.
No, I mean, I think it's probably
Switch
slowly
gears.
dawned on me over time. I did find it. It would have been almost easier to just stay with the decision.
I was going to say, was there a point that it just seemed
Yeah,
like I'm here? I should
particularly
stay?
because I was on the crux of finishing residency
Right.
and going into independent practice, thinking, oh, thank God, med school and residency is behind me.
Right.
I can actually start to live life and move forward.
Sure.
And so to decide not to do that, but rather to come back, it was easier to convince me than it was to convince my wife.
Sure.
And I spent a lot of time trying to decide if it was the right thing or not, and I honestly think that I was, once I had made the decision, I absolutely knew it was the right thing.
Right.
It was trying to get myself to the point of being able to make the decision was the challenge, but once I made it, I've never regretted it.
Sure.
And when I look back, I think I would have been very disappointed, and probably disappointing as a general surgeon had I done that, because it wouldn't have, I wouldn't have been able to engage in it with the same enthusiasm at all.
Do you see your enthusiasm that you carry or you hold in orthopedics as arising from having gone down that wrong path, or if you could do it all over again, would you toss out those years that you followed general surgery?
No, I think that I know that there's a part of why I cherish and enjoy doing it is because I think it was hard got. I think it was a long, winding road to get to it, and so I think because of that, I think I appreciate it. I think I appreciate it all the more. When I think back I took 2 years out to do a Ph.D. unpaid. That was a challenge. Thankfully, I was married. My wife was working, so she could support that. And then I remember how difficult and time-consuming it was to write up the thesis while I was an orthopedic resident. And I know at the time I was cursing myself for doing it, thinking this was like the dumbest idea ever. But now when I look back on it, I think, you know what? No, that was the right thing to do. It was like that you earned it, I guess.
It was all part of the process.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
getting
And I
to
couldn't
it.
imagine having got there any different way. Yeah.
Yeah. If there was one thing, looking back, that you know now about your process, about the work you do, about anything, if you could go back, is there one thing that you would change, or one thing you wish you had known when you started out? Not to hearken too close
Yeah.
to the question about would you redo general surgery, but is there something about medicine or something that you wish you had known at the beginning of this whole process?
I think that understanding the importance of striking a balance in your work life with your family life. Thankfully, I've realized that, but it was almost too late. And if there was anything I would have changed, I would have realized that earlier. With the PhD and then the orthopedic residency, that was challenging from a family life perspective. And then coming here to do fellowship, and then trying to convince an Irish woman to stay in Vancouver and not go back home to Ireland.
Sure.
And my son was 5 when we came to Canada, and him growing up, I missed a lot of time of him growing up. And then when he went into high school, it was a bit later actually, when he was in grade 10, I made a conscious decision that I was going to be strategic about creating a better balance. And that meant I had to cut back on some research activity, or I had to at least be better in how I manage my time to get that done. It didn't affect my clinical practice, but rather all the 100 other balls we tried to juggle at the same time around it. So if I was to have changed anything, I would have wished I had realized the importance of that balance earlier, and been a bit more strategic or planned about how I would maintain that balance like all the time.
Do you think that's a balance you could have attained earlier on, or is it something that you were forced to be working as hard as you were based on your studies and having to keep going through residency?
Yeah, I think the easy answer would be to say, oh, it was a situational thing. I had no choice. I had to do it. But I think in reality, I know I made conscious decisions to stay in the lab and do a bit extra, or stay at work and write another paper or whatever. I made decisions to do that rather than to leave work. And so I think I could absolve myself from blame by saying it was situational, but I don't think that'd be honest. No. I think I made that decision at the time because I believed I had to. I believed that it was the right thing to do, and that it was an important part of the building from an academic perspective and from a clinical perspective. When I look back on it, I don't think it was all that critical to have spent all that extra time. That a couple of hours I stayed in the hospital when I could have gone home, or the couple of hours I stayed in the lab when I could have gone home. So yeah, I think it was a choice I made. Yeah.
Well, to finish up on slightly lighter topics, our other research fellow, Dr. Thieson, who you met earlier, will be quite upset if I don't ask you to explain to me the difference between Doctor and Mr., or why Dr. Chapman earlier today was calling you by Mr.
Doctor, Mr. Doctor.
Yes.
So in Ireland, so when you finish med school, you're a doctor. But once you become a surgeon in Ireland or in the UK system, you're no longer called doctor, you're called Mr. So you would have started out as a Mr. ever before you went to med school.
Right.
You finish med school, you become a doctor, then you become a surgeon, then you go back to being a Mr. But I have a Ph.D, so that's a doctorate. So he calls me Dr. Mr. Doctor.
Why is it that surgeons go back to being Mr.?
I think it's a historic thing that dates back to the old English system. Certainly in the late 1800s, 1900s in the UK system, there was a very marked distinction made between a surgeon and any other doctor. And the surgeons were placed on this way higher pedestal than other doctors. And so I think that's where the Mr. part came from. And the other possible component, of course, is that the very first surgeons weren't physicians. Right? The very first surgeons were barbers or butchers, and so probably may not have actually have been physicians, and so weren't called doctor. Yeah.
Right. Sure. Well, interesting little tidbit. Well, thank you very much for being so candid and insightful on this. I've really enjoyed this, and I know all of our viewers will find, I'm sure, this very insightful, and hopefully they'll enjoy it as much as I have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks.